Dream Cruise. Joining me are two of the key creative talents behind the making of this film. Gentlemen, would you like to introduce yourselves?
My name is Daniel Gillies, and I played Jack.
And I'm Mick Garris, executive producer.
Thanks so much for being here today, guys.
No problem.
Let's start at the beginning. Mick, why don't you tell me about the origins of this particular project?
Well, our partner on Masters of Horror, our Japanese partner, is Kadokawa Productions. And in season 1, we were able to get the very infamous imprint from Takashi Miike, and Kadokawa helped us do that. And this year we went in a different direction, wanted to do sort of an Asian ghost story from the Japanese perspective. And Norio Tsuruta had done Ring Zero and a film called Premonition, which both really impressed us. And he was somebody who had a good relationship with Kadokawa, and we thought he would be the perfect master for season 2. And so that's how that originated.
What is it that appeals to you about kind of opening up the series to international filmmakers?
We've always intended the show to define horror as broadly as possible, and we wanted to get perspectives from the filmmakers, get really unique perspectives so that each of them brings their own individual vision in, and not to have to impose a style or an impression or an approach to horror, and let it be entirely original to these guys. And so Norio Tsuruta was one of a handful who really has a strong command and a knowledge in that genre.
It's certainly opens the series up stylistically and visually, gives it a whole different feel to see something shot internationally by an international filmmaker.
Yeah, horror is international. That's why we had Dario Argento from Italy. We had Peter Medak do one he was Hungarian-born, and to actually do an Asian film in Japan was really a great opportunity for us.
Was this sequence shot in Japan as well?
Yeah, it was. It was such a fascinating day, and they shot it really kind of fast. I felt for these boys because they were in these wetsuits all day long, and I remember, for kids, getting dressed up and getting undressed all the time. Like I remember them taking their lunch break and everything, and they had to have these bodysuits on. These kids were so great, man.
And they're American kids.
Yeah. Oh, actually, that kid's British. The one playing the young version of me is actually he's a Brit, but the younger boy is American.
Where was the casting done?
It was all done. The whole production was done in Japan.
Really?
Other than casting Daniel, which was done out of Los Angeles. It was done in Japan.
Can you talk a little bit about that, Daniel, about how you were with the process for...
There really was no process. I was very blessed in that this great project was offered to me.
So it was sent to you, the script was sent to your agent, you read it?
Right, and I read it, and I liked it. There's a bit of a tennis match after that, but we don't have to talk about that, right?
No. What can you talk about?
No, it's just, it's always like, whenever offers come through, and it's, it's always a blessing for an actor. If it's a great project, it's always about time constraints and how long you're going to be out of the country, and I'm a married guy and being away from your wife, and everything. It's silly little things, and they're sort of nice problems to have. I don't know why actors ever complain about things like that.
How long were you on this shoot?
I was on this for 6 weeks, and I just had the most amazing time in Japan. I really want to take my wife back there. I just loved it. And we did work incredibly hard, but it really left a beautiful impression on me. Like, the Japanese people are just so amazing. I love their systems. They're so vastly different from us. It's weird. They've got such a huge... They're so influenced by American culture, and yet they're so unique from us at the same time. It's an interesting dichotomy. This was the last scene I shot, this shot right here. This is the very last scene. It was quite strange.
Now, I'm assuming this is on a location. This is not a set that was built.
This is on a location, yeah. And most everything else was built, obviously not that initial boat scene, but...
Right, well, we'll certainly get into that.
Well, most of Imprint was shot outside of the city. And in this case, this was much more Tokyo set. There were a couple locations that were out of town that were a bit of a travel, but on Imprint, almost everything was a big travel.
I see. Now, you mentioned that you had a 6-week shooting schedule on this. Was that the entire schedule?
Yes, it was.
That's quite a bit extended beyond what
About a week of prep.
No, we had a week of prep, didn't we? I'm sorry. Yeah, I got there, and luckily I was with Mick during the time there, so we had a little bit of fun. It was
We
nice.
spoke English together.
We spoke English together.
you bonded. Strangers in a strange land.
It was neat, actually. Like, you know, like I mean, I think it's healthy for you to do that once in a while, to go into a place and be, as you say, a stranger in a strange land. We had people that were looking after us, and we had translators with us all the time. So generous.
Now, a 6-week schedule, Mick, that's somewhat extended beyond what you did for the other episodes, is it not?
Well, when we're shooting the series in Vancouver, we have every 10 days we're changing over. This was done independently as a single episode. It's very expensive to shoot in Japan unless you're a Japanese company shooting within the country. If you were to come in and impose it, it's a very different situation than...
I have to stop you guys at this point. This is the amusing thing. I got to tell you this story. Ian arrived on set this day, and unfortunately his agent hadn't provided him with all of his lines. And I said, you know, I'm a bit of a worker. As Mick knows, I'm sort of a pacer and a worker, and I like to get the stuff out of the road before you hit the set. And I said, let's run these, mate. You know, at lunchtime, we had our little Japanese lunch boxes, and I said, let's run these. And we got to a certain line, and you know, while we were running the scene, and then I think it's about here, actually. That's not bad timing.
Das werde ich tun.
Ist irgendwas?
Nein.
And he just sort of he suspended the silence, and I thought, wow, this actor's being really brave right now. He's really suspending this. He's obviously he's using this for effect in the scene. I said, so you know, do continue, and he was like, oh, there's more? And I handed him the page, and I just never forget the terror on his face. Just handing him the rest of his scene. He was so mad, and there's just this host of expletives from him, like over the ensuing sort of minute or two. And I said, look, let's do this.
Jack,
let's keep it. Let's put our heads down. Let's do it. And he was great.
Hey G, wo steckst du? Du bist ja kaum aufzuspüren.
Ich weiß, warum du anrufst.
Warum treffen wir uns nicht hier in meinem Büro und wir reden darüber?
Ich bin in der Yumehama Marina. Komm her, wir können hier reden.
Oh, yeah. Yoshino Kimura-san.
Well, let's talk about that actress and what it was like to work with her.
She's terrific, man. You know, she's a Japanese girl who grew up in New York.
Yuri.
And she has this, she's just like this wonderful, like,
Ich hab eben mit
bright
AG
energy. She would walk in a room and everybody sort of felt a little bit better, you know. She's just a really sweet, amazing person.
So
And
her English was as good as it is in the film.
yes, she's very good, actually. In fact, I think she's playing down her English a little bit within the movie, just to, you know, like she didn't want to sound so expert.
I see.
But which I thought was an interesting choice.
Yeah, because she'd been living in Tokyo for a long time, since she had lived in America, she didn't feel confident about her English, which was amazing because she was great.
She's very funny. I mean, she had, you know, like...
Well, also you wouldn't want her speaking with a New York accent.
Well, that could have been interesting.
Yeah, there's
Like
that.
Rosario
another
Dawson.
bold choice.
There's Rio.
Uh-oh. Oh, boy. That's the entrance of a wolf, if ever I saw one.
Yeah. Oh, he's great. He really, just with a look, does so much.
I never...
Well, it's 180 degrees from the character that he played in Audition, where he's just this sweet, generous guy. I mean, it's such an amazing performance, and to discover that he was this huge rock star in Japan.
I know, that was amazing for us. And we discovered he had 30 albums or something like that.
Yeah.
Like Mick and I, and he gave both Mick and I some CDs of his stuff, but he's huge. I mean, going out with Rio, out and about, not just because he's an actor, actually more because he was a musician. He was always hat and sunglasses because kids would mob him. I only went out with him once, and that was an experience. It was like...
It's an all-nighter with Rio.
You're going out with Elvis Presley. And she's just as huge as well, Yoshino, but obviously for more because of her film work.
Hey, schön, dass du da bist, Jack. Hey, G.
Leider haben wir nicht viel Zeit. Lass uns direkt zur Sache kommen, okay?
Tut euch keinen Zwang an.
Jetzt entspann dich doch, Jack. Auf dem Meer haben wir jede Menge Zeit zu reden. Setz dich.
I never forget I had a translator who literally stood at about my navel. Her name was Nozomi. Nozomi was Nozomi.
Create
not
an
Nozomi.
international incident here.
Yeah.
So yeah, exactly. Nozomi was my translator, really little girl, but I never forget her saying that she thought that Rio looked very sexy when he was playing a bad guy, and I was like, wow, really? Man, I am straight.
Also, his band is this real metal band. They're really like thrasher band, and you don't expect that from him at all. It's like, holy shit.
He's such a kind guy. I had massive laughs. With
No,
him.
I would have expected more of like an Asian Paul McCartney or something.
Not in the slightest.
No, man, they're hardcore.
Ist sie nicht wunderschön?
Ja, wirklich eine Schönheit.
Na komm, auf ins Vergnügen.
What were the challenges? I'm assuming his English. If he
Yeah,
had
it
any,
was zero,
Yeah,
and
okay.
which was really interesting. It was a really good learning experience for me as an actor, actually, because you got everything through a filter system. Like you actually stopped, had to really like succinctly articulate exactly what you wanted to say, give it to your translator, and then they would receive it. So what was lovely about that is it kind of subtracted any direct energy. Like there are times. And look, you know, my first week, I worked a 19-hour day, a 20-hour day, then a 16-hour day, then a 17-hour day. Like like by the end of that fourth or fifth day, and there's a lot of frustration at the smallest things.
Sure.
You're still you're unable to actually sort of directly sort of affect one another with your frustrations because you're going. I recommend translations for people who even speak the same languages. Like I recommend telling a mediator always, because I remember thinking it was such a good lesson for me. It was like, stop, really think about what you want to say,
Right.
because there's only the solution, and that's the only way you're going to get around this. You can't. There was no time for talking about what was wrong. You could only find solution because you did have this sort of hiccup, quote unquote, of the language barrier. But it was great, man. I learned so much from it, and it actually kept me really, really calm while
Was he focused on performances or how?
You know, what's difficult about the Japanese, yes, he was. I'll just preface that with, yes, he was definitely focused on performances, but the way they approach a scene is they will look at it in its entirety during a rehearsal, and then they'll break it into little pieces and film those little pieces according to where they want the camera to go. Now, as most people know, during an American scene, you shoot sort of mise-en-scene, or you shoot, at the wide, and you go into the closes, and you cut according to what you think is the most interesting part of the scene.
But you run the scene from beginning to end.
You run the scene from beginning to end.
From every angle.
From every angle. But with this, you run, these little fragments of the scene. So, yes, he was, but it was difficult in the beginning just to learn how to sort of get it up to a place. Like, say you're shooting the middle of the scene first, which is, a really unusual little moment that they want to capture on the camera. It was a little strange for me at first. I kind of got into the rhythm of it, though. And and you become less and less reserved about needing to get yourself into, and I would run the beginning of the scene while they were rolling the camera, just out loud or whatever. I became sort of a bit of a clown because
It seems like it would be kind of a workout on your technique, though. I mean, in other words, that you would really have to be focused in a way as a technical actor rather than, say, working from within in order to have a consistent performance in a way that's almost
without
like
losing sight of it.
Right. It was very technical, but I actually found when you trusted what was within more after a while, it was better anyway. Like I found after about 3 days, I went, just trust whatever's in you, and you usually hit the level anyway. It was interesting.
How much direction would he try to give you as an actor in terms of characterization?
Not a lot in terms of characterization. I think he had a lot of faith during the rehearsals that he felt like I was already in a place where he was interested in what I was doing with the character. There were certain levels that he wanted me to reach, and at times, I wasn't sure of the level to take it to, and I wasn't sure that he was taking it too far. But he was usually on the money,
Now this brings up a question. What was the food like in Japan?
Terrific.
Yeah.
Just the best food. I miss it.
Unless you're a vegetarian.
Yeah. So my wife's not exactly gonna have the greatest time there, but it is. Yeah, poor Mick, because we had to wander around like everything's sort of meat. But I'm carnivorous, and I gotta say, man. But then again, like remember the udon noodles, and and just and sopa, and just like traveling around. I mean, it was so. It was delicious. My mouth's watering. It was terrific. Like just like the quality of the food, and it's just like food is a real. It's a real celebration there. It's a real it's a real moment of your life, and people think about what they're going to eat and talk about it. It's not this, let's go grab a hamburger or anything like that. It's like, what are we going to eat at this time? Because, it's really special.
But they eat a lot less there.
Yeah,
a lot. I mean, when they serve the lunches and everything on the set and the like, it's amazing how few people are overweight in Tokyo. Very slender people, and the amounts of food they eat at their meals is tremendously smaller than what we're used to in the U.S.
I mean, what you're looking at right here on the screen, this is not a typical Japanese meal. And actually, it was probably the only time in Japan that I saw a kind of a Western-looking meal, which I think is a good choice for the movie. But it was weird. It was like, this is spaghetti with sort of mussels. It was bizarre, but it was always just like, it was always sushi, sashimi, noodles, just amazing, like combinations of food that you wouldn't have even dreamt up. Their idea of quote-unquote sweets, whenever you would go to one of their 7-Elevens, it's like, oh man, I'm eating bread with red bean inside it. And it's kind of got this unusual glazing on it, and that's a sweet, like, you won't find like a Snickers bar or anything. It's just like, I loved it, man.
Like $5 pears, and
What's the mood like on a Japanese set as opposed to what you're used to working in Western films? Like, what's the crew like, and just what's the general atmosphere?
Do you know? If I'm honest, there's a lot more fear on the Japanese set. There's a lot more
tension.
Yeah, just the needing to do things right, and I would sort of venture to say that was probably a cultural thing. It was just like the terrific perfectionists. This is sort of an umbrella generalization, but like the terrific perfectionists, the Japanese. That's why they have such beautiful quality in a lot of different artistic respects.
You sense a kind of a hierarchy, class-wise.
Yeah,
in terms of
I
job
do.
levels
Exactly. Like with the director, I saw that there was a great desire to do right by him and to do right by each other. Whereas I do feel like in New Zealand and Australia and Canada and America, where worked, I found a lot more sort of unity and sort of collaboration. That being said, there are definitely sets in the States that I've worked on where there's definitely a hierarchy there too.
But that's a very good point, because as I think about it in hindsight now, the 2 times I've been to Japan on Masters of Horror films, the crew is not nearly as playful as a crew in North America. They're very serious about their jobs, and they're hardworking. They pump out setup after setup after setup. It seems to be a faster process, but there's less of the playful camaraderie. They're more serious about it. It's not to say that North American crews aren't serious about it. They're the best in the world, but these guys are terrific technicians. And there's not much time out for joking around and playing.
It was very buttoned down and focused.
It was, but what's neat is just below the surface there is a desire to play as well. And as they would get progressively tireder, I would just take advantage of it. Like I would whisper jokes to the sound guys. I learned a little Japanese, just enough to amuse them, like 2 or 3 little phrases or whatever, which would just. It was amazing. Like I got such mileage out of like 2 or 3 little jokes that were just like. which would
For
send.
example,
Oh man, there's a district of that's sort of considered a nerdy district, which Mick and I actually went and visited, and the Japanese crew got onto this. It's called Akihabara. It's where you basically buy all the electronics in town, and it's like you can't even imagine. It's like a citadel devoted to nerddom. It's
fantastic.
It's incredible, and like you never see anybody under 25 in toy stores, and like buying things. I even bought a toy myself, but the Japanese caught wind that Mick and I were in Akihabara, which is this fortress of nerd.
that this was a location where we went into the engine room on the boat there, and it was early on in the shoot, and it was, I think, a 2-hour drive to get to it after we'd finished all of this other stuff. It might have even been the Marina day. No, I think it was the next day.
It was the next day.
But it was like 3 o'clock in the morning when you were down below in the hold of that boat, and it was an endless day.
Ryo Ishibashi, I think, tried. It's a really hard line to say as a person who speaks English, but the word is the prop probably got hung up on some seaweed when he's down. And so I try and say that 5 times fast. The prop probably got hung up on some seaweed. Now, for a Japanese guy, that is like an obstacle course of landmines. And he literally was getting so frustrated with himself. I think I made the situation worse because I put my hand on his back at one point and said, "It's okay, man." I said, "Just, I wanted to comfort him, and I think that almost made the situation worse. Not that he was mad with my compassion. I think he got more frustrated at himself.
And that was one of the things too when I did that final little tweaking on the dialogue, realizing that it was then in stone for the people who were not really comfortable with English. You couldn't just throw an alternative line on the set and say, just change it to the rotor is stuck, or the propeller, as opposed to the prop probably. And you don't think about those things until you're confronted with people who English is a second language to them.
Right. But as Yoshino Kumuro-san got more, we progressed through the shoot, she actually got more and more confident about both her English and and her decision to perhaps change a line here and there. And as she did, you really noticed it. You really noticed, like, if she was having difficulty with something, I would just say, you can change it. You know how to change it if you want to. And I think there was a lot of resistance to that at first, with particularly with one of the dialogue coaches, because his version of doing a scene is to set something in stone and to take that thing that you set in stone to the set.
This stuff looks great. Again, not something you'd expect from a movie on a schedule and a budget.
I know.
How are these shots achieved?
Some of the stuff is in a pool that's about 20 meters deep on like a horse ranch just outside of Tokyo, and which is really fascinating. And looking at that stuff. But some of this is actually out in the marina as well. They actually captured some stuff there too. But this stuff is all in a pool.
And how do they control the light?
Well, the gentleman who was the DP had shot a lot of stuff in water before, and in fact his big forte was pre-Dream Cruise was shooting things in water. So he was.
But it's an enclosed tank. In other words, it's not exposed to the sun. I see.
Yeah.
This is some of the most suspenseful stuff in here, I think. Just whenever you're messing around with a propeller, and you're pulling stuff out that's sticking it and keep it from running. I just think Tsuruta-san did such a great job of building the tension here. It's almost unbearable when it really starts to kick into gear here, literally and figuratively.
Ryo Ishibashi too, man. Like the crew just loved him. I mean, like anything he would say, and he was very serious. He was when it came time to work. But he would really sort of diffuse a lot of tension, by just sort of throwing a joke sideways, and the crew felt like they could relax. Like he was kind of energy for them. It was days with him on set. I had some huge laughs. I mean, he's really funny. He's really vulgar, actually. He's got a really vulgar sense of humor, which I loved. I'm always drawn to, but that's why Mick and I are friends, He's just obscene. He's obscene. This is me pulling against the second AD right now. And I actually pulled the second AD into the boat with that last cut. And I felt bad for him. But I really wanted to create that tug of war with the sea.
Well, they really do a good job of integrating the sets with with actual water. I mean, It really does look like this boat's out to sea, and that could have been a difficult thing to handle if it hadn't been done this way.
It'll be fascinating to see what happens theatrically with this. I'd love to see this with an audience in the theater, the feature-length version.
Me too.
And see what that's like. I don't know if I'll get to, but I hope to.
We should do that sometime.
Yeah.
We should figure out a way. This,
Bitte hör auf, es war ein Unfall.
she's so great.
Es ist
Sometimes she
vorbei,
looks
es
like
war ein Unfall, hörst
an
du?
animal to me, and I mean that in a complimentary way. She looks like, because when the light hits her in a certain way, her face is so beautiful that you almost can't see the whites of her eyes, and she almost creates like a haunting image.
Das wär das Beste, was
She
uns
didn't
passieren
like being thrown around, though. I got to be honest. A lot of Japanese actresses, and I noticed this in India as well. They're not accustomed to being touched, and this is a very Western thing. And I said, whenever there was scenes with a lot of tension, her body became quite tense. But what's traditional with a lot of Japanese stuff, the actors tend to not. Especially men and women. The men throw each other around all the time, but the women and the men don't. Even within sort of romantic stuff and desperate stuff, they don't sort of touch each other. So every thing that involves like grabbing one another or touching or talking, was a negotiation. Everything was like, can we do this? Is this going to be okay? And if I'm honest, American actresses are a lot more accustomed to, if you're doing a thriller, chances are you're probably going to be falling to the floor and moving around and everything. But she was a sport, but I think she wasn't as accustomed to that level of
Being manhandled.
Yeah, basically being manhandled. I mean, and I actually. I got to be honest. I like the way that it looks on screen. We look like a couple who are used to touching each other, and sort of, there's some approaching shots of Ryo-san, and I love him sitting on the bed and the creepiness of them.
Yeah, there's a stillness about the ghost story that often you don't find in other kinds of horror stories.
Right.
And that stillness, just that wide shot of a boat in the middle of the water, it's filled with dread and ominousness.
Yeah.
And that is so creepy and so Kubrick-like. It's very much a Kubrick shot.
I have to take credit for that shot, actually. I suggested it. I came to. We had only one scene that we were shooting in the bedroom, but I said let's use the bedroom, and he did it.
And he did something really special with it too.
He did a beautiful job of lighting it, and that scene is so weird.
Well, that wide shot is so beautifully and creepily symmetrical. It's this perfect symmetry of this dangerous shadowed guy just sitting there, and you don't know if he's thinking, if there's anything going on there, but there's a coiled spring that's ready.
It's so great, man.
One of the nice things about Eastern horror films, as opposed to the current trends in American and Western horror films, is the very thing you're alluding to, Mick, and that is that there is a willingness to go with stillness, a willingness to go with quiet, to let things slow down and let things be ominous and build in that way, rather than always feeling like they need to pump up the action and move things forward. And it gives the audience a time to kind of let the movie get under their skin, which is
the anticipation of horror is almost as bad as the payoff. Almost as wonderfully bad as the payoff.
I mean, this is a very psychologically driven piece. It's not gore and splatter and knives and and you're actually, it's quite a leap of faith, because you're asking the actors to do that, and I feel like a lot more of the Japanese horror I've seen, you're trusting the actor to create that tension, rather than, well, if I do this effect and I do this wonderful thing, or if I put this light through here that's eerie, like nothing creates suspense like the actor, and I think that there's a real dearth, especially in American movies, where there's less and less trust of the actor, too many cuts, too many. They don't trust that we can actually make something really terrifying. I mean, you look at a movie like Capote, for example, and you look at how few cuts there are in that movie, and how, I mean, masterfully guys like Philip Seymour Hoffman will create these places that you go to with him. I mean, I don't know why I suddenly tangented to Capote, but but that guy's not going to be winning any Academy Awards for Best Editor, and yet the knowledge and the mastery of knowing when not to cut and trusting your actors, and I feel like this is really driven by Kimura-san and myself and
Well, storytelling is storytelling, and a good horror filmmaker is a good filmmaker who can make any kind of movie, and not all directors of drama or comedy could do a good horror film, but if you can make a good horror film, chances are you can work well in any genre, because the demands are equal and beyond. You have to know how to direct actors well and performance and tell a story well, in addition to building tension and suspense and fear and taking you someplace you don't expect to go.
Well, the same rules of good drama apply, right?
Exactly.
Character, theme, story.
Sure. A good horror movie is just a good movie. And you know, the guys we have on Masters of Horror, the filmmakers, are people who respect it, who don't feel like they're slumming because they're making a horror movie. They're working within a genre that, you know, it goes back to time immemorial, to cave paintings on the walls. You know?
Yeah, it's really good classic storytelling. It's mythological. It has a beautiful. I love it. You know, and yeah, you're absolutely right, Mick.
The more human it is, the better the story. The more compelling the story, the more you're drawn into it, and then it can take you anywhere. You know, people talk about a movie like Hostel being just like torture porn, but there's great character stuff in Hostel. It's very funny and engaging and unbelievably gruesome, and I think a very successful movie as well as a successful horror movie. The shot right before this one where Daniel's just standing there surrounded by his environment, the camera's not moving, he's barely moving, just looking around, waiting for what's next and looking for what's next. There's a tension. You see a background that's soft focus, you don't know what's back there. And then when something steps into that background, the tension is just fantastic. So, and Tsuruta-san is a huge horror fan.
Yeah.
He really knows his stuff, and he really knew. I was amazed he knew my films, you know, and that was surprising to me.
Come on now.
No, seriously, because a lot of that stuff has been made for television or whatever.
What did he talk to you about?
Well, he's just, we had conversations through an interpreter about genre films and things, and Western and Eastern, and it's obvious he's a real student of it, and he doesn't just enjoy it, but he really studies how the techniques of all these different filmmakers, and to see a fan of Western horror making a film through Eastern philosophical terms and artistic terms, it really is an exciting marriage, and that's why I love the two films that we were able to do in Japan, because they have such. This one is more Western than imprint by far, but it's still got a Japanese approach that makes it different and unique, and a voice that's not often heard here.
What do you remember about doing this scene?
Oh, mate, you know what I remember was I really wanted to not play him as a tough guy, and what always bugs me.
You don't put up much of a fight.
No, and that's I kind of like the scene for that reason. I really wanted him to be sort of lucky to get out. Like I never wanted him to be. It always bugs me in horror films when somebody's suddenly like a ninja or whatever, and like I wanted him to have. You know, to have fight in him, because otherwise the audience has got nothing to go with.
But he's vulnerable.
But I wanted him to basically the upper hand was always, you know, Eiji, the character of Eiji.
Well, that's the only way you're going to have suspense is if you feel like he's really in danger.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, but I know. I mean, look at someone like Bruce Willis. You know, even when he's in danger, he's never in danger. Look at a lot of action stars. When they're in trouble, they're not in trouble.
Right.
And I hate that. I despise it. As a matter of fact,
They have enough presence of mind to have a funny quip now and again when their life is in jeopardy.
And this guy works in an office.
This guy is an office guy, and I wanted him to be a suit and not somebody who could. Because in all reality, you know, if Ryo-san and I went head to head in a little bit of a brawl, I'm pretty confident I could take him. I'm about a head taller than him, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, he's an older guy. Well, he's not older. He looks terrific, but
He's older than you are.
he's older than I am. He's 67.
I love this.
Oh yes.
Suddenly you know what went on under the boat.
Now we shot this so fast. I mean, we were literally, and I was. We literally shot that. I never saw that face, actually. I didn't see that until I saw it televised. I went, oh, that's what I was looking at. Not a tennis ball, not a hand.
No, I'm assuming that effect was created by the Japanese crew,
Right.
by Japanese technicians,
Right.
Not something that you brought over.
Right. No,
Right.
it was all done in Japan.
Okay.
Makeup effects, CG, everything. All the other films have been shot in Vancouver, and then the editorial is done in Los Angeles, and KNB had done the makeup effects for all the other ones, and the CG was done up in Vancouver by Lee Wilson.
I see.
Man, and you know, and just when you're starting to miss her, because she is so great, you know, she returns. Oh boy, she's in trouble. She's in trouble.
Dan, you've done a couple of horror films.
Yeah.
And, you know, actors that work in the genre, you know, oftentimes find themselves dealing with basically absurd and improbable situations, and it must take a certain level of focus and craft to suspend disbelief and be inside the moment in an honest way and not be amused by it. I mean, what do you know, can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, you know, it's really simple. I mean, like, it's not really simple, it's really complicated, but the precept is really simple. It's just like, just commit. Like, you know, you might be, it might seem like the least scary thing of all time when there's 14 guys standing around you and you're looking at the hand to the left of the camera and imagining that it's a disembodied arm like this, which can be hilarious. But if you and you know, both Mick and I, you know, expressed concerns, for example, about this scene, and it's interesting you bring that question up at this time. It's good because, you know, here I am fighting a disembodied arm. It's, you know, it can be absurd, and unless you commit to that idea and the real genuine threat of it, then you're screwed. Like, I don't know. I've seen people sort of almost judge the genre within their performance, like saying, I'm in this, but it's not really my fault that I'm doing something this absurd. And I always hate that. I always think that's not the spirit of it. It's not the spirit of it. You should really just do it, and it's really challenging. Like, I've learned so much from doing these sequences. You know, you learn so much. They were worried about me doing this shot here because my eye went so close to the blade of the. They were like, they said, I'll let you drop it.
Right.
And I said, oh, trust me, I won't. They were really concerned actually. Noria Tsuruta-san didn't really want me to go that close to the blade, but I mean.
Mick, how do you work with actors that encounter that problem?
Well,
what do you tell them?
I think you have to respect the work you're doing. If you take it seriously, it's okay for the audience to find this amusing.
Exactly.
It's okay to laugh at that hand around the throat. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you don't take it seriously, and another thing that leavens the silliness of that is you're intercutting with this tremendous scene of Yoshi having the water rising, which is a very reliable suspense builder, you know, when you're losing the air.
Are you talking about a laugh? There is a line here, I'm not sure if it was intentionally ironic or not, but where she says, I need a hand.
I need a hand. The number of people that have spoken about that.
Are you responsible for that one, Mick? Or?
You know, that is a Tsuruta-san line, and I'm happy it's there.
You know, it's funny, and you know, there aren't that many occasions in the movie with that things like that happen, and I think it's terrific. You know? It actually lets the genre poke fun at itself without the actors poking fun. You know, it has a little.
Yeah, you don't want the Carol Burnett performance in a horror movie, and a lot of actors don't respect the genre. They, it's a horror movie, I'll do the horror acting, where it's just camped up and exaggerated and the like. But you know, my favorite work in the genre is films in which the actors take it seriously and play it seriously, no matter how ridiculous. I mean, some of Cronenberg's films thematically are way beyond reality, but the acting in them, you know, they play it straight, and that's what I love about the Japanese and Asian genre films. They're played very straight. There's very little humor in a lot of the Asian horror films. Some of them have a lot of it, and some of that humor is very dark. Very, very dark. Like the Miike Audition has a lot of really funny stuff, but it's really darkly funny.
Du hast mich betrogen. Hilfe!
This is some of the most disturbing stuff in the whole piece, I think.
Definitely.
But she's so physically in her body as an actor. She's incredible. She comes from a family of famous actors, as a matter of fact, and filmmakers. And the most generous, sweet person, man. I mean, the days they made her work, she worked incredibly difficult days, often with lots of bizarre makeup. And nobody was more noble about that, or has ever been happier to be an actor working than her. It was like a real lesson for me. I watched her and thought, she's so dignified. Look at that shot. Those are gorgeous.
When she becomes the ghost, I mean, she's an iconic Japanese ghost. I mean, she's so great and creepy, and just that when she's crawling towards the camera and the like.
She's as creepy as anything CGI ever, and yet she did that herself. You know, it's a tribute to how her level of devotion. She's a cool lady. Really liked her.
Did she speak English?
She spoke a little English. It was, and for which she was always apologizing.
The table readings were really interesting. It was fun to sit and beforehand, everybody sits around the table and they go through the script. And when you're looking at the script, on one side you've got English and the page facing is the Japanese translation. And so virtually everyone spoke English, but a couple of the people didn't, like the cab driver and the like. And it's always a fascinating thing to see everybody sitting around a table and this bicultural exchange of ideas and the reads. It's fascinating, and it also lets you know what works and what doesn't verbally.
Junge!
When that water came out, I got sent back into the bench in my back. They had set up this massive hose. It looked like just a gigantic filter, like a huge, like an air duct almost, and it came up out of the ground like a massive mechanical elephant's trunk, or a gigantic periscope or something. They were like, "This is going to nail you with water," and I was like, "I've heard that before." And I failed to see how you're going to get any kind of projection, any kind of force out of it. We'll do this. I'll get ready. And so I kind of really relaxed, which I think helps the movie a lot. I sort of relaxed my butt, but it nailed me. I went so far back into the kitchen bench. It was funny. They loved it too. That was one of the few times, because they're fairly meticulous. It was one of the few times we got the shot, and he said, "Okay, let's move on." Like that was it. Like you're not going to ever get more nailed by water.
There's a lot of great physical suspense in this, and physical acting, and just more than just the emotional parts of it, which amps up the emotional stuff, like this scene here. But
now, again, this was another negotiation, because again, a lot of the Japanese actresses aren't accustomed to being touched, and I saw this one coming on the horizon and the call sheet.
Pumping the chest.
So
too.
I asked if we could make a little box to go over her chest, actually a little wooden thing, so that I could hit something. Because I knew they were going to shoot with two cameras, and I wanted us to both be able to have the ability to touch something, or not without sort of faking it, because it's so critical.
Oh my God.
AJ!
Juli, ganz ruhig, Juli, ganz ruhig. Alles okay. Er ist weg. Was zum Teufel geht hier eigentlich vor?
Ich hab alles gesehen.
Was redest du da, Liebes?
Ich hab gesehen, was passiert ist.
I'm getting taken by it. It's interesting. It's oddly sort of romantic, this thing.
Hat Naomi
Well, again, it's just beautifully lit. The colors are just, really well thought out.
And yet the confines of the set are such that there's very little camera movement in this movie. There's a lot of stillness, and it works stylistically for it really well. But I have a feeling that it was born of the limitations of the sets and locations.
Well, there's some of those sets you really don't have that many choices angle-wise, I would think. Like certainly that machine room. I mean, how many different places can you put the camera?
Das halte ich nicht aus. Wir sind
Jetzt reiß dich zusammen. Juli, bitte beruhig dich. Hey. Wir müssen uns zusammenreißen. Liebling. Okay?
Jack.
Okay.
Jack.
Okay.
Jack.
Okay.
Jack, hör zu. Hör doch.
The DP, Sano-san, as I mentioned earlier, had a terrific amount of experience with shooting underwater. He was an interesting guy. He always had a glint in his eye, and he was always sort of ready to take a joke. And yet I found out about halfway through the shoot from some of the members of the crew, they were like, "Oh man, he's a stern taskmaster. He's a real hard ass. Like if he and without ever raising his voice, he just wanted things to be done the right way. And I would joke with him him and say, you know, because he always had this glint in his eyes. So he was like Bill Murray, you know. You were like, there's always a joke waiting to happen. He was always sort of ready and willing to laugh. He was cool though. Like, he'd make suggestions about what you could do with light, and he actually, again, he loved shadow as much as light, which I think is critically important for horror, as we were talking about before. And he wasn't afraid of it. And, you know, knowing, of course, that in post-production they're going to darken everything up. It was actually a hell of a lot brighter than this, but he knew sort of where to place you and everything. But he was a really great guy, and was often, you know, operating the main camera. But negotiable too, like, you know, is this okay for you? Because I'm going to work around you. You don't hear that often here, you know, like.
And I love the lighting effect on that's achieved on this figure. How was that done? I mean, is that all?
Part of it's CG.
Yeah.
But mostly it's green gelled light with a little ripple to it, and then kind of a bluish cast around it.
She is.
It's very effective.
I actually, unfortunately, didn't even see the half of it. Like, watching her come up and everything. I mean, she could do things with her body that, I mean, she was positively yogic at times.
So this is broken up on 2 shots, but you worked together that day.
Yeah, we worked together this day, and she was great.
That must have been good for you.
Yeah, and difficult for her because she was covered in that crap all day. And I mean,
Flies love that fake blood.
Sean.
Hey, Jack? Jack? Was ist denn in dich gefahren?
it's really kind of a little sexy, if I'm honest, and I'm certainly not paying myself. I'm watching it. What I'm taken by is there is something a little sexy about it. Being on this boat, the wet. It's kind of like, I'm like, you know, God, I hope my wife doesn't do this.
Well,
But I mean, this passion is the theme of this thing. You know?
And it's all very physical.
Well, you know, because season 1 turned out to be what we hoped it would be, it was to try to keep the quality up and not let it slip, and to be, you know, the budgets did not go up. Everything was pretty much the same, but everybody was even more adventurous the second time around because they felt they achieved it the first time around. And so, okay, well, maybe we can do this. And so it was to just try and keep everything different, everything new, everything exciting, and not repeat ourselves. And everybody's reach kind of expanded a little bit on season 2. And we also did want in the Japanese film to have one that would air on Showtime. I mean, it wasn't a choice to make one the first time that wouldn't.
Right.
But, you know, when Showtime chose not to air Imprint, we knew that it was important to Kadokawa that they came to us with, it was more important to them, really. They came to us with material that they knew would get on, because they were hugely disappointed that Imprint did not air, even though it aired all around the world.
Spectacular, by the way. Like,
Yeah.
if you haven't seen Imprint, it's really unique. It's terrifically dark, and it's got a dark sense of humor.
Strong doesn't cover it.
No, it doesn't. Have you seen it?
Yes.
I mean, it's kind of stunning. It's one of the most. It's just shot beautifully. The colors are magnificent. It's so macabre. Like, it makes, you know, David Lynch's, you know, Inland Empire look like Driving Miss Daisy. You know, it's really harsh.
It goes places you didn't think there were places to go.
And I'm sure, and we know Showtime felt the same way.
Yeah.
But it's nice that, so you got one that actually can hit the airways. And
Well, we wanted something that really reflected an Asian sensibility, an artistic Asian approach to horror, and they wanted to do a ghost story, and they wanted to do something from Suzuki-san. And everybody loved the short story, and it's very short. I thought, well, how is this going to make a movie, especially a feature-length movie? And Saruta-san had a take that really fleshed it out, and Suzuki was approved of it because he he had to.
Had you read the original short story?
Yeah, there's a book called, I think the book is called Dark Water, maybe, that has the short story of Dark Water and Dream Cruise and some other things.
What did they do to expand it, the narrative?
It's just much bigger. I mean, it is the same triangle, but it's just made more into, it's more external than internal. It's the short story is much more internal than this.
This was Yoshino Kimura-san's final shot before she had to leave set. It's weird looking at how dark it is because it was obviously quite bright in there. But she was it was interesting. I noticed her. The load on her shoulders sort of lighten as we were going into this. You know, she was seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Meanwhile, I had like about 5 or 6 days left to shoot. I was kind of jealous. She'd been working so hard too.
I was only there 11 days. You were there 6 weeks. So.
Were you there for the full length of Principal?
Yeah, basically. I think it went on for another week or so of some second unit stuff, but after I was gone. But yeah, no. Oh, look at what she can do with her body, man. It's just incredible.
Jack, hier. Okay.
Nein, niemals. Ich kann nicht.
Was? Aber du musst.
Ich kann nicht.
I think it's an important part of breaking away. Yeah, you know, just like rock and roll is really important to the development of young people. It's important to break with the adults. It's important to realize that the establishment is not always the path you want to follow. And it's important to break rules and establish, you know, a new self of your own. And you want to be into things your parents aren't into. And I think it's allowing yourself creative freedom to break away from the pack. It's basically an anti-establishment sort of movement that some of us continue through to this day. I mean, it's not choosing the path of the parents, and I think that's what opens the door to this genre.
Well, as a filmmaker, do you find yourself, you know, still very much in touch with the films of your youth and the horror films that you grew up with?
Not a question. Yeah, absolutely. You know, I love the old stuff I was brought up with, even though I know that probably college age and high school age kids today might find a lot of that stuff boring. But I still go to the movies. I love genre films, the good ones, from the beginning to now. You know, a good horror movie, like I said before, is a good movie, and I love it. And I still, you know, I like breaking the rules. Horror is not supposed to be polite.
Right.
It's all about, just by definition, it's about something different, you know.
It's transgressive.
Transgressive is my favorite word for it, you know, and I've always said that horror is to movies what rock and roll is to music.
Sie ist verschwunden.
Daniel, let's talk a little bit about this scene. This is really beautifully done. Now, how is this shot?
You know, we're in the pool that I mentioned earlier, which is, I believe it was on a horse ranch just out of Tokyo, and we're some gentlemen are pushing some little boards in the water, trying to create an ocean around
But you are
us.
seeing shots like this of the boat.
Now, this was tough to stay because there really were some translation issues because we had to shoot fast. We were in the water on sort of platforms, and it's a massive pool. And unfortunately, you know, they'd be trying to explain, now you're running from this green thing, now this is happening, and they would sort of heavily articulate everything, but I wasn't, like, there were some things that appeared in the version that I saw, Masters of Horror on television, and I was like, oh, that's what I was running from at that moment in time. Okay, that's...
You're not the first actor in the history of the genre that's had that experience.
And I was like, okay, this is, like, I really, because I tried to be so clear, I didn't want to do anything until I sort of knew what was going on, you know, so probably ad nauseum to a lot of the Japanese crew, but, like, you know, oh, geez, that's so scary.
But again, there are long shots of the boat. Now, is that a full-scale?
That's what they captured that when they were out at the marina, and that actually looks sort of CG to me. But
Did you have a stunt double for this scene?
No, I did this myself. I did. There's only one. Those cutaways you see of him grabbing his leg are the only ones that I did not do. I did everything else, which is neat. But I
Maybe you'd have liked having.
Yeah, I don't know. There was times I wish the water had been more turbulent. As a matter of fact, I kind of wished they've actually cut it together kind of beautifully to create the turbulence. But I thought that the water felt too still for us. I kind of wanted some stormy, but I
Well, I
think.
must tell you though, watching it though, it does lend a kind of a dreamlike quality, which I think works. You know,
Oh,
I
that's
mean,
cool.
You know, there's something unreal about the moment anyway in the situation, so I don't think that it really works against it.
Oh man, you know, like any artist, anybody will say, you know, that when you're involved in something, you're always looking at it so with
Right.
such a sort of a heavily critical eye.
But a viewer experiences it differently. I think people tend to just
Yeah.
accept what they see.
It's true.
you
It's
know.
true. You know, and that's kind of the annoying thing about being involved in the business, isn't it, Mick? Like, you know, your willing suspension of disbelief is suddenly shot to bits, and it actually, and the miracle is when you actually go along to a film, and you're really taken away by it. You're like, oh wow, I'm not questioning
Right.
where they put the camera or the shots. I'm listening to the story. That's the kind of the goal, you know.
Now you know you're watching a good movie.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
Jackasses like me come in, and I'm always leaning over to my wife and I can't believe they did that. They really screwed that up.
You know, that the dummy of the dead boy, which we saw on the first day at the marina when we were shooting, everybody was so freaked out by it when they saw it because it had a blanket over it and it would be uncovered, and you know, it's the kid reaching up as it's floating up or away in the earlier scenes at the marina, and they use it in this scene as well. It was very unnerving to see this dead child dummy. It was very
And
creepy.
beautifully made too. Like, it really looked like a kid in the water. It was horrible, man.
The
again-
makeup effects people there were terrific.
Yeah.
See?
Now, one of the things I actually like about this movie is that it ends on a note of hope, which is rather, let's say, against the trend in the genre, and I think it's kind of nice.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's always some sort of element of foreboding, or like, you know,
One last shock
The
or something.
uh-oh.
the future, the
Yeah.
Which I think really is becoming, you know, such a predictable thing that it's really just nice to have something kind of resolve itself in a way that you know,
Yeah,
leaves you
this
feeling
and-
good about what you saw.
This and Black Cat had happy endings, you know. That's very rare for Stuart Gordon,
Yeah.
but this too. I mean,
During the scene, Kimura-san loved the scene. She turned to me at one point and said, "Wow, it's so interesting not to be running away from like some violent supernatural force." Or
Yeah.
She didn't articulate it that way, but she sort of said how incredible it is just to sit with somebody and have a conversation in a scene, like which
Right.
is 90% of the other, you know, jobs that you do. You're usually just doing things that you're familiar with, that you know, and I mean, it's so interesting. And we really, she was like, this is so fun just to do. I mean.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for being here today. It was a lot of fun chatting with you about this movie.
Thanks so much, guys.
it's great. Thank you, Perry.